Welcome to Touring Into, your political show on 103.7 The Beat and M106. Hi, I'm your host, Gregory T. Roberts. First of all, happy belated Thanksgiving. I pray that you found a lot to be thankful for in this time and this season. Let's get to it. We have a lot of news to cover. Our top 10, the virus. 1,200 people died on Thanksgiving. Almost 90,000 people are in the hospital, including a lot of people I know. According to Johns Hopkins reports, 23 states are heading in the wrong direction. Only 7 are heading where they are stable. Those days, those people and those hospitals and all that is changing day by day. Rest assured that this virus is in the suburbs, it's in the rural areas, it's in the community, it is here. Let's go to number 2. Spice warning from the CDC not to travel. 5.96 people boarded planes. Go to video. Janae, are you there? We got a video on that one. Okay, I'll keep on going. Number 3. Let's go to number 3. Spice warning. More news on the virus. A third company could be ready to submit a vaccine to the FDA. So we have our videos ready. Okay, we'll just.
Hailed as a vaccine for the world, it's far cheaper to produce and easier to store because it doesn't need to be frozen. Tonight, 3 billion doses are being promised next year. Over 20,000 people took part in the trials, including participants in age groups most at risk, like Robin Powell, who's in his 60s.
It feels like a weight's sort of beginning to be lifted off.
The preliminary results published today by Oxford University show 70% effectiveness, better than a flu vaccine. That compares with this month's results from Pfizer and Moderna, both more than 90%. But surprisingly, a smaller first dose of the Oxford vaccine gave it 90% effectiveness too. And it uses tried and tested technology.
The safety profile has been absolutely excellent.
A 30,000 participant trial is still underway in the US. Washington invested more than $1 billion, but already AstraZeneca is celebrating.
How does it hit you personally?
The sooner we have a solution, and this can be a potential solution, the better it is. So there are emotions, there's an enormous sense of pride.
And preparing to present its findings to the FDA, looking for emergency authorization. A virus that has moved sickeningly fast, but now the vaccine breakthroughs accelerating. Keir Simmons, NBC News, London.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for...
There's more news on that because North Korea, and we just found this out, North Korea tried to break into that website of that company. We'll have more news on that next week. Number 4, the president said he would leave the White House depending on the vote of the Electoral College. Stay tuned on this one because that Electoral College vote might be interesting. Roll tape.
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, if the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden on December 14th, will you concede the election?
It's going to be a very hard thing to concede because we know there was massive fraud. So as to whether or not I can get this apparatus moving this quickly, because time isn't on our side, everything else is on our side, facts are on our side. This was a massive fraud. This should never take place in this country. We're like a third world country.
Just to be clear, if the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, will you concede?
Well, if they do, they made a mistake because this election was a fraud. Just so you understand, this election was a fraud. I mean, they have Biden beating Obama on Obama's vote in areas that mattered in terms of the election, in swing states. And yet he's losing to Obama all over the place. but he's beating Obama in swing states, which are the states that mattered for purposes of the election. So, no, I can't say that at all. I think it's a possibility. They're trying to look between you people. Don't talk to me that way. You're just a lightweight. Don't talk to me that way. Don't talk to. I'm the president of the United States. Don't ever talk to the president that way. All right, I'm going to go with another question. Go ahead.
So, if the Electoral College does elect President-elect Joe Biden, are you not going to leave this building?
Just so you, certainly I will. Certainly I will, and you know that. But I think that there will be a lot of things happening between now and the 20th of January. A lot of things. Massive fraud has been found. We're like a third world country.
You know that it's tradition for previous presidents to go to the next president's inauguration. So will you attend?
I don't want to say that yet. I mean, I know the answer. I'll be honest, I know the answer, but I just don't want to say it yet. Look, a thing like this possibly has never happened before, but maybe people just didn't catch it. But we've caught it. We've caught hundreds of thousands of votes. Listen, excuse me. When they don't allow a poll watcher, which is a sacred person in our country, people don't know what a poll watcher is. A poll watcher it's considered sacred in our country. When they throw them out of rooms,
But that's not true. They didn't do
sure
that.
it is. And when they put them in pens,
Your attorneys admitted
excuse
it.
me, no, they didn't. My attorneys did not admit anything.
So that happened. That was a crazy press conference. I know that's a lot of meat there. The president is right. There is going to be a lot of things happening between now and January 20th. You have seen, if you have not seen or heard, they have they spoke in Pennsylvania with Giuliani. They will be heading to Michigan and Arizona. So stay tuned. You're watching or listening to Torn in Two on 103.7 The Beat, M106. If you have any comments, questions, please go to our Facebook site, 103.7 The Beat, or go to our webpage, www.103.7thebeat.com. Going to the next thing, bombshell from the Supreme Court. Let's just rotate.
Breaking news overnight, the Supreme Court has ruled against Governor Cuomo and has temporarily blocked restrictions of religious services in New York State. Cuomo imposed restrictions on capacity in houses of worship in red and orange zones as a way to combat the coronavirus pandemic. The 5-4 decision came down around midnight with Chief Justice John Roberts and the court's 3 liberal justices dissenting. Justice Amy Coney Barrett's vote became the deciding factor. Similar cases regarding restrictions in Nevada and California resulted in opposite rulings. Those were handed down earlier this year when Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was on the court.
Thank you very much. Speaking of pardons, on Wednesday, other than pardon a turkey corn, which got away, Michael Flynn was pardoned by the president. Let's roll tape on that.
Details on this Michael Flynn pardon. The president commenting right now, this is a tweet from the president. It is my great honor to announce that General Michael T. Flynn has been granted a full pardon. Congratulations to General Flynn and his wonderful family. I know you will now have a truly fantastic Thanksgiving. You might recall this pardon comes after a judge had effectively ruled on a motion that the Justice Department's move to dismiss the case and undo the Flynn guilty plea was not going to be received too well. The president reported said he was considering granting the general a pardon in the case, but didn't act until now. You might recall that Flynn had pleaded guilty on December 1st. 2017 was part of a plea agreement to cooperate with the probe that was conducted under then Bob Mueller, the former FBI director, who was overseeing the so-called, named after him, Mueller investigation into ties the administration might have had with Russian players. Turned out to be much ado about nothing in the end. The Justice Department earlier this year had filed a motion to dismiss the case outright. That wasn't flying with the judge. The general was running into some headwinds. The president took care of the headwinds by pardoning him today.
stay tuned for that as well to see what other people will be pardoned. Number 7, President-elect Joseph R. Biden on Wednesday delivered a raw, optimistic address to America, urging them to hang on as they face a long, hard winter. It was a great speech by him. And, America's, like we spoke last week, is that don't wait for the White House, don't wait for Congress to do what you can. And thank you, people, for stepping up. Number 8, the Dow, in spite of all the people that are hungry in food lines and people that are laid off, another 700,000 people applying for unemployment, the Dow struck over 30,000 points for the first time. Roll tape.
Well, thank you very much, and I just want to congratulate everybody. The stock market, Dow Jones Industrial Average, just hit 30,000, which is the highest in history. We've never broken 30,000, and that's just despite everything that's taken place with the pandemic. I'm very thrilled with what's happened on the vaccine front. That's been absolutely incredible. It's nothing like that has ever happened medically, and I think people are acknowledging that, and it's having a big effect. But the stock market's just broken 30,000. Never been broken, that number. That's a sacred number, 30,000. Nobody thought they'd ever see it. That's the 9th time since the beginning of 2020. And it's the 48th time that we've broken records during the Trump administration. And I just want to congratulate all the people within the administration that work so hard. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the people of our country, because there are no people like you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, why not? Do you have any intention of pardon yourself, Mr. President?
After that, the president took no questions. Number 9, you think that you are suffering from virus fatigue? Try being a doctor, nurse, or a first responder. We really want to put our hearts out and thank you, people, for working, and some of you giving your lives. We notice, we're watching, and we really want to thank you. Number 10, on behalf of the board of this radio station, I'm the vice president, I would like to thank every volunteer, every sponsor, and staff for passing out food Tuesday in the snow. We really appreciate, and I'm sure the people that receive food, they appreciate it too, but I really want to give a heart, it's coming from the heart, thank you for volunteering your time. Thank you for giving of your dollars for the less fortunate. Now, today's guest, you should have a good doctor in a house. You should have a doctor, and listen to your doctor, so you have preventive health, and in case of that emergency, you should have that doctor on emergency. He's a different kind of doctor, but today we're going to welcome our guest, Dr. Dale Nesbary, Ph.D. How are you doing, sir?
Doing very well. How are you, G-Man?
I'm doing well, and I want to welcome you to the Torn in Two team. Bishop T.D. Jakes said this: you should hang around someone that challenges you, or someone that makes you feel stupid, so you can learn. So today, for our people and our listeners and our watchers, would you tell people a little bit about yourself? Your bio is incredible.
Well, the bio, most people see me as college president guy or going back a little ways, professor guy. But over the years, I've worked on political campaigns, I'd say off and on since the late 70s. Mm-hmm. That includes everyone from Governor Jim Blanchard in Michigan to Mayor Ray Flynn in Boston to now Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence in Southfield, Michigan, who my wife and I worked on her campaign. Actually, my daughter too, who has a Master of Public Administration herself, worked on Brenda's campaign when she ran for mayor of Southfield, Michigan, which was her previous position prior to becoming Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I think of myself as a policy analyst or a political analyst more so than, say, a college professor or a college president.
Right.
So that in terms of my background, the bio's up there, but if you had to ask me, what do you do? I think of myself, even today in the work that I do in Lansing or DC, virtually, I think of myself that way more than anything else.
We have a thing in common. I started to learn the trombone until somebody stole it, but you they stole my trombone, man. But you play trombone in music as well.
Yes, I do. I've played trombone since actually 4th grade. You know, my parents asked me, which horn do you want to play instrument? I said trombone. So I decided in 5th grade I didn't want to play anymore. And they disabused me of that notion fairly quickly. Picked it back up in 6th grade. So I played either, you know, for money, not for money. For any time you ask me to pick up a horn, I'll do it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I played that for, I guess, 50 years now. I still love it. I've got a horn sitting out that I haven't played much lately, right upstairs.
Okay, let's get to it. Okay,
yes, sir.
In your years as being a political analyst in politics, in my years of being in politics, have you ever seen an election, a political year like this one?
Nope. Not even close. I mean, it's just unfortunate that we are where we are now. But yeah, I haven't seen anything like it. I mean, we have. It's funny. Everyone talks about rules that we have to govern what we do, and most of those rules are really not in writing. They're norms. They're behaviors. They're the way that people should behave in a civil society. Mm-hmm. Given what we have in our U.S. Constitution, in statute and case law, court decisions, there's some relatively sound guidance. But much of what we do we do it because everyone agrees that we should do things in a certain way. Mm-hmm. If someone comes along who says, "I'm not going to do it, I'm just going to do what I'd like to do," then that throws quite a bit of our political processes into chaos. And it takes good people to bring us back to focus. So yes, indeed, this is a different year, but we do need good people to have us focus on what we should be doing and the way we should be doing it.
I think that's a great statement there. What you said, we really need good people to get us back center, concentrating on the Constitution.
Yes, indeed. And I should add that there are many out there who would argue that they're strict constructionalists, they're strict constitutionalists, and they go back to 1804 or 1789, the year the Constitution was actually adopted in its current form. Mm-hmm. And this is the Constitution is an evolving document, and law is an evolving process.
Right.
So for someone to say that we should do things the way that we did them in 1789, most of the signers of the Constitution would have had the right to own me. I want to go back to 1789.
Well, just tell the truth.
Yes, indeed. So I mean, that's one of the reasons I became a political science professor, is because I grew up at a time, and I'm 65 years old, and I say Ruby Bridges, she is the same age, or I'm the same age as she is, the young lady who was the first African-American attending an integrated school, elementary school in the South. And so people, when they ask me about history, I'm an old guy. I remember those days. I went through some of those experiences, not to the extent that Miss Bridges did. Mm-hmm. But we had some tough times when I was growing up. So, you know, I don't want to go back to a time people talk about the good old days. No, the good old days were.
You're right.
Right. No, I don't want to go back there.
No, we weren't owned in the quote unquote good old days, like you said.
Yes, sir. So that is my perspective on.
I like how you said that it's the Constitution is a living, breathing, changing document, and people don't understand that, you know, we have to stay up on the Constitution. Actually, and there's some things that we need to add to the Constitution, like the Voting Act. You know, there's some things that need to be done.
Absolutely. I mean, again, when people ask me about history, I share stories. So being college president, being a longtime professor, and someone who, I mean, I've been mentored by outstanding mentors, and I've done my best to mentor those younger than I am. But I share that my dad, when he moved to Muskegon, by way of background, I've lived in Muskegon not maybe about a third of my life. I grew up here, moved away for 35 years, moved back about 12 years ago for this position.
Mm-hmm.
But my dad literally could not vote in Tennessee when he was leaving the U.S. Army World War II era. I mean, think about that.
Now we're not talking that far back.
No. We're not talking about the Civil War. We're not talking about World War I. We're not talking about, actually, we are talking about Jim Crow, but we're talking about the ends of Jim Crow, the period in this nation.
Mm-hmm.
About 80 years of time. He couldn't vote in Tennessee. I mean, the law said he could, but poll taxes and other restrictions said he couldn't. So he chose, and my mother chose to move to Michigan, which was a much more reasonable state. And even here, I mean, the story that people, this sort of blows, I don't have any hair to go back, right?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
But you know, so when moving to Muskegon, he couldn't buy a home in the city of Muskegon, or he wasn't allowed to, because of discrimination. Didn't want him there. So being a sharp guy, he ended up buying 56 acres of property in Twin Lake, Michigan, which is, if you don't know the area, West Michigan, just sort of west of Grand Rapids, across the lake from Milwaukee. So in the country, he managed to buy that acreage, which I think is wonderful because I grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they said, no, sorry, man, you can't buy a home in Muskegon because you're black. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so and literally that's how it worked.
Right.
So it's a different community now, but there are still issues. But yeah, this when people talk about history, I talk about, no, that was my father you're talking about.
And you know, I don't think people understand. I don't think people understand. Like even in the neighborhood that I live in, that there are people that bought up all the homes, so none of us could live in that neighborhood, and that wasn't that far back. And you know,
no, it wasn't, and that's why I think it's important to share those stories. I mean, in terms of the politics that we're going through now, people ask, how did we get here? I mean, at a certain level, we never left. I mean, the issues that are rising up now, and it's not just about race, it's about political power. It's about healthcare. In your stories, your top 10, several issues were in and around COVID-19, the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these issues have to be addressed and have to be resolved over and over again so that we keep moving forward. We can't let them go by the wayside or not stand up to those who would put barriers in our way.
Mm-hmm. My next question. This year, people voted in record numbers. How do we convince people that 60+% is not good enough? And it was the most, you know, we, for the first time, we clapped our hands saying, wow, people, you voted in great numbers, but 60% it's only 60%. If I cook 60% of the dinner, we're still missing 40%. And if you look at races like in Georgia, what's going to decide the Senate, how do we get people to fire it up to understand that they need to vote, especially what you were just talking about, Jim Crow, your father couldn't live in Muskegon. What do we need to do?
Well, I mean, that's a great question, and I don't know if I have the answer to that. But I have a story about what difference one vote makes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a professor at Oakland University for 12 years, a political science professor, and I directed the Master of Public Administration program for part of that. one of my students was Tim Melton is his name, and Tim is, I guess Tim's probably about 50 now, but he ran for a county commission seat, and out of 40,000 votes, he lost by one vote. One vote. And so Milton said, "Hey Doc, you know, this is just tough." No, I'd worked with him a little bit on what he should do and how he should do it. I said, "Man, at a local race like that, you've got to knock on doors. You've got to get to know people. You've got to ask them what service you may provide to them, and then in turn you've earned their vote." So Tim said, "Yeah, I got you." So the next time he ran, he won by about 5,000 votes. Ended up ultimately, I think he was I know he's a state legislator for a while, and I think he's a consultant now. I mean, brilliant guy, but Tim, it was just one vote. And Tim had things to say, but he couldn't say them until he got that vote.
Right.
So, but one vote makes a difference.
You know, if you look at Hitler was voted chancellor by one vote, and people just don't understand that one vote carries weight. So hopefully we'll have the momentum that people see that their vote does count. And we're divided down the middle right now, 80 million votes for President-elect Joe Biden to 73 million to President Trump. We are so divided right now. We're going to talk about that. Let's talk about the subject today is what now? What do we need to do now? Do you feel that there's a better way to run elections?
Well, actually, our system is as much noise and static as there is about fraud. There's really not much fraud at all. I mean, they're just in a sort of a broader sense. There's not fraud. There's individual cases of mistakes that people make or errors, or in some cases, I mean, there've been very rarely where an elections officer will do something that doesn't comport with the law. But the elections are run relatively well now. I would argue that people should vote in their self-interest and for the needs that they see in their community. And if you think about, say, the presidential election, as our nation, if it's seen as a community, that, if that other 40% of voters would have voted, we would have had about just north of 100 million more people voting. And if all of those went to Trump, he would have won by $93 million. If all of them went to Biden, Biden would have won by 7 million plus 100 million. So, there are many people who don't vote, and they don't see the difference that it could make. But any small part of that group could have swung the election either way. So I say, hey, if you don't vote, then my vote doesn't have to be canceled outright, or my vote stands on its own. So if you disagree with me and you don't vote, that's great for me as an individual. But yeah, it's critical that if people actually see the numbers and see what a difference a vote makes, or a million vote makes, it's incredible.
Well, people really took advantage of voting by mail. Is it, should we look at voting, some states voting early? We've talked about, some people have talked about when it comes down to presidential elections, because we have states' rights, maybe we need to do something more formed in unity. Sure. How do you feel about that?
Well, just a couple issues. One, in terms of voter by mail, I think that's an option whose time, I mean, it's been in place for a number of years. Typically, it was called absentee voting. So if you were not in your state or not in your community, you could vote absentee, by mail, or voting late, or something of that nature. But because of the ease of voting over time, as opposed to having everyone come and vote in one day, to me that's an imperative. We should make voting easier, simpler, not more difficult. I mean, the states, I think, do a very good job at managing their processes. Again, I mean, we had there's been I'll say a ruckus about Michigan, Pennsylvania, and I believe Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah, where the races were relatively close. Actually, Michigan wasn't that close. Michigan was 147,000 votes, I believe.
Around there, yeah.
So that's not close, but still, there's some upset about that. And upset because there were absentee votes. I'm thinking, okay, let me get this straight. So again, being political scientist, that's something that I study, and I've studied over the years. Up until this year, until this election, I mean, I'd say the Republicans sort of had that figured out. They got their people out to vote absentee. They got ballots to them, and they returned those ballots, and they were voting absentee or by mail in droves.
Right.
And so the Democrats finally figured that out and said, hey, you know what? That's a really good way to go.
Yeah.
You got old guys like me who I don't want to go out and, well, that's not true. I like it now, but you know, it's a lot easier for me to sit at my table, you know, vote, mail it back in. I'm in business. And so they figured that one out. So then the Republicans, instead of just pushing it further and doing what they should have done, what they've done historically, they said, okay, so the Democrats are doing this now. We're going to pretend that that's some sort of an issue. We're going to ask everyone to come and vote on, our people vote on election day because everybody else is bad thing.
Right.
How can you possibly do that? I mean, track back throughout the history of presidential elections, and you will see that older voters are more likely to vote for Republicans, and that's been the history in this country. Again, the Democrats, they can buy voter files too, and they buy their voter file and they say, okay, this is a range of people we have to vote. Let's get our information out to these folks, have them vote early, have them vote by mail, or whatever technique is required, and it worked fantastically well. So that is an option that I think actually both parties should take advantage of, and not pretend that there's something wrong with it when it's been done by both parties, and even President Trump has voted by mail.
Right.
So all of a sudden this is a bad thing. I say, come on, if you're a good political strategist, you're going to take advantage of every tool. You're not going to say this is a bad way to go, while the other guys are, you know, fully taking advantage of it. That's just going to hurt your campaign.
Right. The president yesterday declared fraud with the election. He did it today as well. And you were just talking about that. What do you think? You talked a little bit about the election, but what do you think about the fraud of millions of votes?
He's just making it up. Literally just making it up. And I think under the assumption that there may be people who would work with him. And if you follow what happened with our state legislature and Senator Mike Shirkey and Representative Lee Chatfield, the Senate Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House in the Michigan legislature, and they followed our processes for years. They understand what our processes are. They understand, say, the United States Constitution. They understand Michigan's Constitution. They understand how voting processes are almost exclusively the realm of the states. And they also understand that they've been managing these processes for years as well. They had not seen any fraud. And according to what they shared when they came back from their visit to DC, was that they shared that there's nothing wrong with our process. There are literally not millions of votes that aren't being counted or being misrepresented. If you can find those, demonstrate that. But no one's done that because it's not happening. They both Republican and Democratic secretaries of state, governors, legislatures around the country who manage these processes have been articulating that point. I mean, not just in this election, but they've been doing it for years because that's their job. They want to make sure that votes are counted so elections are managed fairly.
I just tell you, out of 31 court cases about fraud across the country, 30 were thrown out. One was awarded, but that was only a couple votes. So it's showing to me that the states did what they had to do. To me, it's a little upsetting. I will say this, that the areas that are being attacked now are where the most African Americans are: Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Chicago, Milwaukee. And to me, it said nothing good comes out of Philadelphia and Detroit. To me, that was upsetting. What about you?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's, again, I mean, the president and the people around him see a way to depress votes in areas or somehow disallow votes in areas that are highly democratic, which also are highly African American people of color. I mean, they're proxies for each other these days. So that seemed to be a way to convince people that those votes were corrupt or somehow there were issues. I mean, that one case that you're mentioning, that where there was a finding of a vote that was not voted correctly or illegally. There was, I apologize, I don't recall the specifics of the state, but the person was a Trump voter. He went and voted. He came back and he put on a hat and a mustache or something like that and said he was his son.
Yeah.
So I'm like, don't be careful what you ask for, because people will look into this. And again, those are really one-offs, which is the problem. So no, there wasn't massive voter fraud or intimidation in Detroit. There wasn't massive voter fraud or intimidation in Philly. And there were plenty of poll watchers in both cases from both parties. I mean, allowed to enter as by the laws in each state to observe the election. And when people were saying there aren't poll watchers in these spaces, I mean, everyone can. We don't have to be a political scientist to not have your eyes be problematic. You watch the reports, ask questions, or the people who are in the spaces reporting on who's there and interviewing those people. Are you a Republican? Yep, I'm a Republican. What are you, a poll watcher? Yep. You're a Democrat? Yep, I'm a poll watcher. You have any problems? No. And that's kind of a flip way to put it, but that's the way the process worked. These people who work diligently to ensure that our elections are run well are basically put on the griddle because there are people who are trying to disallow votes, apparently.
Well,
I can't
and with that, we need to thank those people that worked so hard for the election. No, I mean, no matter who you support, the people who counted ballots and worked at, we have to thank those people who did that in a pandemic. It was just amazing to see our democracy at work.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not easy, and you're paid little or nothing to do the work. If you are an elections official, if you work for a clerk's office or a secretary of state, something of that nature, you're paid to do a job. If you're a volunteer, you're not paid to do a job, and there are many more volunteers than there are paid employees. They're there to ensure the electoral process is important. And again, to me, it's critical to me because I have a history. I understand. I mean, not just new people. My parents, came from places where they couldn't vote because of the color of their skin, and they moved here and still had some difficulty in terms of where they wanted to live, what they wanted to purchase, and how they wanted to do business. So, I mean, you love this. So, my grandmother, I've worn glasses forever, so she called me professor because I wore glasses. So I thought that was kind of funny at the time. But I became a professor because of people like her, and people like my dad, my mother, relatives who were committed to making sure things did well. I mean, that's why I do what I do. It's that important. I'm on your show right now. Having this conversation because it's that important to me that I will take my time to speak to anyone who wants to know about our electoral process. I mean, it's critical.
And we really appreciate your time. Now, I wanted to talk about something. What are some things we can do to help this divided country?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that's an outstanding question. I mean, we are divided. I mean, we've been divided for some time, and it seems as though we go through waxing and waning of having division. And the best thing to me that we can do is talk to our relatives and talk to our friends about the issues that are ongoing. I mean, again, you don't have to be a political science guy. You don't have to be a professor. You don't have to be a college president to have a conversation about working with others in a civil manner.
Right.
And so having the conversation is number one, but having a frank conversation, if someone is doing things that you don't agree with or that you believe is causing that division, call them out. Don't say it's someone else.
Would you say that again? Please say that again, because it's not happening.
Well, yeah, I mean, call them out. Call out relatives. Call out friends. I mean, I'll give you a story. Here's another story of something that happened that where I said, "But I'll call somebody out. The good Lord put me on the earth to do good work. If calling someone out is going to be that work, I'm going to do it." So a friend of ours, we were having lunch. I don't remember where it was, but a friend of ours named Tim, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. We were having lunch, and so his cousin is at another table. So we kind of joined tables. We started talking and having a conversation about stuff that you'd have at lunch. But so the conversation went to, well, where are you from? And so my wife said, I'm from Fremont. And I said, well, I'm from Twin Lake. And so the person said, don't you mean Lakewood? Right? I said, no, don't crack up too much. I'm ready to cry here. So I said, okay, I'm going to take the low road. I'm not taking the high road this time. I said, what do you mean Lakewood? And so I just kind of looked at her like she was from Mars. And for those of you who don't know, in this area, and I grew up way in the country, way in the country. And so in Twin Lake, there's a little town of Twin Lake where I grew up, just kind of right outside of it. And then there's a place called Lakewood Club, which is part of the zip code of Twin Lake. But traditionally, I mean, long time ago, people didn't really refer to it that way. So I said, I mean, black people live there, in her mind. So I said, so why would you say that? And so she just kind of fumbled for a minute. I said, is it because I'm black and you think only black people in Twin Lake are from Lakewood? I said, no, I grew up by the little blinking light, go about 7 blocks that way. That's where I grew up. And so her husband was kind of cracking up about it because he said, man, this guy called her out. Apparently that's kind of the way she behaved. But I think if we let people get away with those kinds of comments, you say, oh no, they just had a bad day. No, she didn't have a bad day. Her mind told her that a black person couldn't live in Twin Lake.
Right.
So you had to be from someplace else.
Right.
My grandmother I lived in Lakewood for a while. To me, it was a wonderful community, but that's not where I grew up. And I resented the fact the person said what she said because of her bias. And her, like I said, her husband thought it was kind of funny. Tim kind of cracked up too. But and it can't be the black guy having that conversation with a white person to make it happen. It's got to be the other way around. Hold your relatives accountable. And it's not just race. I'll just put it that way too. If someone's saying things that don't fit with the law or with civil society, call them out. Don't let them get away with it. If you allow them to do what they've been doing for the rest of their lives, then nothing's going to change. You've got to do that work. No one else is going to do it.
I find that I've been having a lot of conversations with people and talking with people throughout this process, and it's going to go for a while. Do you have the same thing happening with you?
Absolutely. And what I will say is, I've been putting out stories and examples of issues that are out there from either a political or racial perspective about how, they're issues, they're problems. But I mean, again, compared to where they were when I was a kid or years before that, they're much better. And it's because people have these conversations and they're having them more often than they did in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it's again my perspective. It's a generational issue. Nothing's going to change overnight, but if we don't put forth that effort, and I hope I'm answering the question, nothing's going to change unless we do the work.
Right. Next question. If this election stands like it is, what does President-elect Joe Biden have to do on day one?
Okay, day one. Now, as the president of a community college, I would hope that he puts his wife in a position that was going to help us out dramatically. I have to put that out there first. But
put that out there first.
Yes, sir. I've got to say, actually, his wife is Joe Biden. Dr. Joe Biden is a professor at Northern Virginia Community College,
Mm-hmm.
and she's been very supportive of colleges generally and community colleges specifically. So,
and she's going to continue to work, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, you look at what she's doing, and I mean, shoot, I was a professor at a university for a number of years, for 15 years, including part-time work. So yeah, I mean, I give her credit for being willing to do that work.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on day one, he needs to address, I'd say, student loan debt. That's critically important. There are so many students out there who, by hook or by crook, have been put up in a position by their lack of knowledge or their lack of direction of being up to their eyeballs in debt. So to me, that's from a perspective of a college, I'll say constituent, that's critical. I think number two, to put us back in good stead on the world stage. Frankly, there are people out there, and this comes from having visited other countries multiple times, and specifically Germany and places like that, that we're kind of a joke to them. They're like, what happened to you people? You know, why are you taking yourself off of the world stage? Why are you supporting? We had a conversation with a guy, I'll never forget it. He just looked at me like, I wasn't Dale Nesbary. I was this American who was just not doing this job. So how can you allow your nation to be moved in the direction that is being moved? Say, hey, I didn't vote for him. Come on. He said, no, I don't care. He says, this is your country, and that conversation happened multiple times. So to me, I mean, to be able to put ourselves in a position where we can bring credibility to our nation as a nation state. I mean, seriously, I never thought I'd live to see a day where I'd have that conversation. But that's kind of where we are. So if people don't believe it, that's not my problem. My problem is people not acting on where we are and how we are perceived because of actions that we have taken as a nation. And I say we, even though I don't think I contributed to it, but I'm part of the community. And so as a broader community, whether you agree with this or not, you have to do something that's going to improve our standing. I think third, economically, we were having a conversation about investments, myself, my wife, and some other folks, about how are your investments doing? Investments doing great, but investments only work for people who have investments. You don't give I'll say a gosh darn about the Standard & Poor's, NASDAQ, or Dow Jones if you don't have any money invested, if you don't have the resources to do that. If you're working 2 or 3 jobs, I mean, when I was growing up, we worked jobs when we were I wasn't supposed to be working when I was 14 at a grocery store, but I got away with it as long as I could. But to help my parents out so that we'd have enough money to make anything.
Right. So, I think it's very important that people understand that most people are $400 away from a catastrophe.
Oh, I mean, that is dead on. And most people aren't capable of having a 403B. I mean, they don't have one. Most people don't have the resources that we're told by our society that everyone should have. It would be great if, I mean, we're the only nation well, I'll say developed, but I mean, I saw this picture of Lagos, Nigeria. There was some things going on there. And it looked just like LA, like 10-lane expressways going either way. So I hate to say a developed country versus a non-developed country, because non-developed countries look a lot like us now. In some cases, they look better. They offer health care to their residents. And somehow in this country, we are in a place where we can't figure out how to do that. I mean, there are so many issues that need to be addressed. But those are a couple, 2 or 3 that I think come to my mind as you ask the question.
Very good. I need you to switch hats for me for a second.
Yes, sir.
Looking at your biography and your bio, what drove you to achieve and strive?
Well, you know, I think having parents who raised me the way that they did, and having them give me the confidence that I could do whatever I wanted to do, even though I was that young man who, again, same age as Ruby Bridges, going through some of the same things she did. It doesn't matter what those people say. You can work your way through that, and God willing, you are going to be able to accomplish whatever you would like.
Right.
So I would say my parents, most important, but I was. So I have a lot of, I'll say, mentors sort of out there, right? We have a person right now who is from Wayne County Community College who is mentoring with myself and my senior staff on campus. And so she asked me, she said, okay, hey, Doc, what's the most impactful part of your life? What caused you to think that you could become a college president? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but one of those items that it's right up there was I trombone player, right? And I played professionally for. I mean, I still play for money, depending on who wants to pay for this old guy to play for him. Right? but I had the good fortune and blessings of be able to back up the Temptations. So when I'm sitting there, there's a band there, and there's the band leader, his keyboard and his drummer. Then there's several horn players. And this guy, the first thing he said was, "Look, I know you guys can play, but there's like 10 guys right behind you who can play just as well as you can."
Right.
So you miss one note, and I'll call the next trombone player, call the next trumpet player.
Right.
So needless to say, I didn't miss any notes.
Right. Right.
So I mean, so I say that just to illustrate that that's pressure. I mean, what I do now, I have time to think and to plan for the next step, for the next say closure of the state. But back then, I mean, I practiced 3 hours a day for probably 15 years to get to the point where I could play with guys like that. But I mean, I've never been in a situation once where it's like live or die. You hit that high D, or I'll get the next bone player. And I knew the next bone player, and I knew the next bone player could play that note.
Right.
So
yes.
so that, I mean, that's pressure. So I'm not to undervalue what I do now or what it takes to accomplish certain things, but you go through life, and there are experiences that you have that mold you, and that was one of them.
I always told the kids that I coached that pressure bust pipes that in order to achieve, in order for us to win, that we have to be twice or 3 times is better than the next man.
Yep.
And it's a must. You have to be, because somebody's chasing after you, and that's going to be a lesson that you learn that will carry you on for life. Do you see that still happening?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, that was the message that my parents and my relatives sent to me as a young black child, growing up and having to compete in a world that wasn't so friendly to me. But that's a message that's good for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell our students, I said, you're at Muskegon Community College, or I worked at Adrian College for a while, or at Oakland University for a long time. I said, you're not competing against someone in the next seat. You're competing against someone from Singapore, someone from India, someone from China.
Around the
They're
world.
working just as hard as you, or harder. And there's
Mm-hmm.
like, 8 times as many of those folks as you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think this is your job, no, this is not your job. I mean, you work as hard as you can so that you're able to compete against someone who wants this job more than you. You have to want this job or this degree more than they do, then you'll be successful.
People should, next question, people should get a quality education no matter where they live. How do we accomplish this? How do we change where in poor neighborhoods, because of the economic and tax base, that their schools are different than somebody in a rich tax base? How do we change that?
Well, in this country, it's very difficult, but it can be done. And that's a question that comes up quite often. So we can't change the K-12 environment. We can't change the university environment. We're sort of set up the way we are. I said, well, look around the world. Actually, look around the country in certain states, but look around the world about for lessons in terms of how we may do that. I mean, we allow funding in, I'll say, the K-12 environment to vary based upon, I mean, for the most part, the wealth of the community. And we allow various states to have better higher education systems based upon, again, the wealth of the community. And there are so many who say, well, they earn this, so they should have a better education. That I'll just simply say that that's not true, that everyone who is benefiting from where they are now earned what they have. But having a more equitable distribution of funds would make a difference in terms of how education is meted out. There's no reason why one school district, say if we're talking Michigan, should have a baseline funding of $7,500, and another school district has a $15,000 baseline.
Right.
There's a tremendous amount of variation, but every student deserves to have an education to which they may strive to complete.
Dr. Dale Nesbary, it's been a pleasure. In closing, what would you say to that person that is struggling about education, that is struggling politically, and how would you like to close us out?
Well, we used to share with our students, and this is, I mean, I could go to prior to becoming a college professor, when I worked for the city of Boston, Massachusetts, and I ran some offices there, research and place and central administration, budget, and part of budget and contracting. And so people would always say, okay, so if I do that, it's going to take me 4 years to accomplish that, whatever that might be. And I would say, actually, my old boss, a guy named Bob Ciola, would say, well, you can either start this program now, or you're going to be 4 years older no matter what you do. So you need to put the effort in along the way, and then you will have accomplished that goal. Don't wait to begin the work.
Right.
If I'd waited when I wanted to, I would have never completed my doctorate. When it gotten that done. So move ahead. Don't let, no matter how daunting the time may seem, if you do the work, you will have that education, and no one will ever be able to take that away from you.
Dr. Daniel Nesbary, welcome to the team. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Listen, that's it. Our show, we're done. This is Torn in Two. Thank you again. I want to thank Lady J, PA, and the staff for coming in today. We will see you next week on Torn in Two on 103.7 The Beat and M106. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
An unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of
latest
Ferguson,
on that police
Missouri.
killing of a black man in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks. It has happened again. Shot in the back as he fled the scene after officers tried to arrest him.
New developments in two high-profile racially charged police shootings. We also know that young black men continue to be fatally shot by police in the United States, and they involve the deaths of two black men in separate incidents.
After the killing of a black man by an Atlanta police officer.
A fatal police shooting that...
Grand jury in New York City has refused to indict yet another white police officer said to have killed an unarmed black man.
I can't breathe. Breathe, man. Breathe, man.
Bro, you got him down, man. Let him breathe, at least, man.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe shit.
No.
I can't move.
I've been wiping the whole body, man. Get on the ground! One of my homies died.
How many more of my family needs to be murdered before enough is enough?
It's never the wrong time to do the right thing.
How many weren't filmed?
We all bleed the same color. All lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
No one is free when others are oppressed.
Get to know me before you hate me.
I'm tired.